This ended up being the most intense drive of the entire New Zealand trip. Torrential rain, waterfalls hitting the road, and a real fear that we might not make it over the Haast Pass. We said our goodbyes to Queenstown and headed off over the Crown Range towards Wanaka, which would be our first stop on this relatively short leg of our New Zealand road trip. Although the Crown Range is narrow and windy and definitely mountainous in its surroundings, in good weather I found it absolutely fine to drive in. Although you could definitely see there were some nervous drivers, so I would say give yourself some extra time if you're taking that route, especially if the weather isn't quite so kind to you. Of course, we had to take a stop at the famous Cardrona Hotel, which is meant to be the most photographed hotel in the whole of New Zealand. And you can see why. But so can everyone else, because there were so many people also stopping for that same photo opportunity. We had a relatively quick stop in the beautiful Wanaka. It's a small town, but the main reason we wanted to go there is probably for the same reason as many other people, and that is to see the Wanaka Tree. The Wanaka Tree is absolutely stunning. However, a little bit like the Cardrona Hotel, you will be faced with lots and lots and lots of other tourists all trying to get that same photo. Having been to other beautiful places in New Zealand like Te Anau and Glenorchy, both of which have trees in the water, I would probably go as far to say the Wanaka Tree isn't worth going out of your way to see. At the end of the day, it's pretty, but it's a tree in the water, and there are so many beautiful places in New Zealand that will not have that many people around. We knew the weather was going to get really bad, so we wanted to make the most of the dry weather while it lasted. As we sat in a local coffee shop, we had a quick Google and tried to find some activities that we could do for the next couple of hours. My hubby decided to go to Wanaka Gun Range. He thoroughly recommends going to that if it is your cup of tea. The chap who was running the shooting activity was incredibly knowledgeable. I believe he was ex-military and just was very accommodating to trying lots of different guns and doing lots of different target practice. So I dropped my hubby off at the gun range, and then I headed over to the Mount Iron track, which was about a 10-minute journey. And I set off on what was probably about an hour's hike. It was quite steep in places, quite rocky, but overall it was a very well-maintained track, and I was surprised to see there was even a defib at the top. I could see the black clouds were starting to roll in, and the wind was definitely beginning to pick up as I got towards the end of that hike. So I swiftly made my way back down to the car. By the time I got back over to the gun range, my hubby had finished his activity, and then we continued on our journey towards where we would be staying for the night. We stayed in a really unique accommodation at Crosshill Geodomes at Lake Hawea. It looked like something out of a Star Wars set. It looked really futuristic, and we were really excited to have a little look around. It's definitely an experience worth doing. However, there are a couple of things that just didn't quite meet my expectations, bearing in mind that it cost 599 New Zealand dollars per night. Overall, I think it is a luxury experience, and if you do have the budget, it is worth you doing. You're not guaranteed great weather, and you are very exposed to the elements, as we were that evening. You have got a couple of options. Either that communal evening meal, but you do need to book in advance. We didn't do that because we didn't want to rush to get there for a particular time. You can pop into the supermarket in Hawea to pick up some snacky bits and have that in your dough, or you can choose to go to one of the 2 restaurants in Hawea. We went to the Hawea Hotel and ended up being really surprised. I had the lamb and it was beautiful. We did find that across New Zealand, though, it's very hard to get a bad meal. There was a miscommunication over what time breakfast starts. We headed over for 8 o'clock, and when we got into the lodge, we waited around a little while before someone came out and told us that breakfast doesn't start till 8:30. That's late in the UK. It's incredibly late for New Zealand. So after we had breakfast at the Crosshill Domes, we packed the car and we set off on what should have been one of the most scenic and one of the most enjoyable drives of the trip. However, the weather just wasn't in our favour. It was torrential rain and we had waterfalls crashing down onto the roads, and we had planned to stop at the recently reopened Blue Pools Trail, but unfortunately we just knew that it wasn't going to look very blue given the amount of mud that would be stirred up in the torrential rain. So we decided to give that a miss. We stopped to fuel up in Makarora, and if you are driving the Haast Pass, it is really important that you fill up your car around Makarora, Hawea, Wanaka Way, because there are 0 petrol stations until you get to Haast. It's quite a long drive. You'll be fine if you top up, but yeah, there was that element of fear put into us before we left the UK for New Zealand about that section of the trip. So because we weren't stopping at a lot of the walks I had planned, it left me feeling a little bit downhearted, because a big part of our New Zealand trip was getting out, seeing the nature and doing a lot of these short walks to be able to stretch our legs in between our road trip. But as we were driving, we could hear a massive waterfall somewhere. We could hear it through the rain, and we were just on the lookout for it. And all of a sudden we saw this sign to a place called Roaring Billy Falls. And we pulled into the car park, which was just off the road, and we took a very, very short trail. It probably takes about 10 minutes in beautiful rainforest, all the moss covered trees, all the ferns hanging over, which actually, even though it was torrential rain, did give us a little bit of shelter. But after about 10 minutes of walking, there it was, Roaring Billy Falls in all its glory. And I think because the torrential rain was so bad, it made the waterfall even more dramatic. You can see from this footage that the water is quite murky, so it did validate us for skipping places like Blue Pools, because I think Blue Pools would have had a very similar colour to the water and perhaps wouldn't have been as enjoyable in reality as I planned for it to be in my head. I had seen in the previous winter, part of the Haast Pass had actually closed the entire road for about 3 months while they were repairing. So I was terrified that there was going to be some kind of road closure. There is no way around. You would have to go all the way back round, which is about a 10-hour detour, which we would not have been doing. We would have ended up just skipping the West Coast completely if that had happened. So as we were on the road, I was very concerned with all the rain that was coming down, waterfalls crashing onto the road. It really did feel like a very, very real concern. We had a couple of other coastal stops along the route before we stopped in our next really unique place. That is the Rainforest retreat in Franz, Josef. We stayed in an absolutely beautiful tree house. They had the best Wi-Fi of the whole trip, which allowed us the opportunity to back up some of our images and our footage. The Rainforest retreat does have different levels of accommodation, and we did stay in the deluxe tree house. We chose to do the terrace walk, which is right in the centre of Franz Josef, and again, much like with the Roaring Billy Falls track, it is a beautiful rainforest style path, well maintained, and it's only about 1.5 kilometres return. It is known for a high density of glowworms. However, we went quite early in the evening, so it wasn't quite dark enough for us to spot any, and we were absolutely knackered. So after that, we did just pick up some snacky bits from the local dairy, the convenience store, to take back to our tree house. We saw some very, very naughty keas. So they are the world's only alpine parrot, and they are so cute, but so incredibly naughty. They are notorious for destroying car windscreen wipers and window seals. And on this occasion, they were destroying a property. They were literally picking away at the beautifully carved wood, making it not so beautifully carved, unfortunately. Just when we thought the weather couldn't get any worse, and when I really needed a good night's sleep, oh, it got worse. there was a thunderstorm. And remember, we're in a tree house. The thunder and the lightning literally hit at exactly the same time. It shook the tree house and it was terrifying. The lightning must have struck ground incredibly close by. However, when we did finally recover from that thunderstorm, we were able to get up and head off to our next location, continuing up the west coast towards the Punakaiki Pancake Rocks. The Pancake Rocks, though, gave us an absolute show. The sunset was incredible, probably the best we saw in the entire New Zealand trip. There's a boardwalk that is incredibly well maintained. It seems very accessible. From the hotel, perhaps not so much because there is no pavement leading up to the Pancake Rocks, but once you are there, it is incredibly well paved and boardwalked. So while this portion of the trip didn't entirely go to plan, it will forever stick in my memory as being one of the most unique and terrifying experiences that I have ever had. In the next episode, we will be going up to see beaches, and more beaches in and around the Abel Tasman area. This is stunning. It will be the final episode in this series, and we'll be tying off with heading back into Christchurch, and there was something else that went wrong. I hope you enjoyed watching this episode. If you did, please hit like and subscribe, and if you haven't already, you can catch the rest of the series starting with us arriving in Christchurch. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.